Hey, writer, ready to take your fiction to the next level? Whether you've just got a great idea or you're already stuck in the murky middle of writing your book, the Wicked Good Fiction Bootcamp I designed just for you. This 8-week self paced online course gives you the tools, the guidance, and the support you need to get to the end of your book and know that it is wicked good. Head to suzyvidori.com/bootcamp or follow the link in the show notes for more information and get started today. I'll see you inside where I'll be there to support you as you comment and share your work throughout the course. Welcome to Show Don't Tell Writing with me, Suzy Vidori, where I teach you the tried and true secrets to writing fiction, nonfiction that are going to wow your readers, broken down step by step. We're going to explore writing techniques. I'm going to show you a glimpse behind the scenes of successful writers' careers that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. And I'm also going to coach writers live on their pages so that you can learn and transform your own storytelling. Whether you're just starting out, you're drafting your first book, you're editing, or you're currently rewriting that book, or maybe even your 10th book, this show's going to help you unlock the writing skills that you didn't even know you needed, but you definitely do. I'm so looking forward to helping you get your amazing ideas from your mind onto your pages in an exciting way for both you and your readers so that you can achieve your wildest writing dreams. And you're going to also have some fun doing it. Let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming Melanie Marttila to the show today, who's been on the writing scene since the 90s with her poetry, fantasy, and science fiction. She's had works published in Polar Borealis, Polar Starlight, and Sulfur. And her debut poetry collection, The Art of Floating, was released in 2024 by Latitude 46. The honor and privilege of working with Melanie on Reality Bomb, science fiction novel with a neurodivergent main character, which came about after Melanie's own diagnosis of autism. It unlocked a fascination with how she'd been writing characters her whole career. In this interview, she shares how this project came together, what it was like to work with me as a book coach, and how she overcame all the obstacles that slowed her down. Spoiler alert, the book is finished and she's about to dive into the query trenches with it. Melanie is a huge inspiration, and I can't wait for this project to get into the hands of readers. Take a listen so you can cheer her on with me. Welcome, Melanie. So great to have you here on the Show Don't Tell podcast today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so the listeners have heard the introduction about all the things that you've done, and you've been part of the writing scene for a while. What made you tackle this novel Reality Bomb that we're going to be talking about today at this particular moment in time?
Well, I'll give you hopefully an abbreviated version of the genesis. It actually started as a dream. And in the dream, there was a scientist who went to another reality, another world. And in that other world, they discovered that they were not a scientist anymore, but they were a pastry chef. And
I love that.
The rest of the dream was just basically her trying to figure out how, as a pastry chef, she was going to get back into the science world and try and fix this problem. So I took that idea and I decided because I was an annual NaNoWriMo person in those days.
Yeah.
That I was going to try it for that year's NaNoWriMo. So I did I would call it like a free write kind of outline in my journal. And did the thing. I won that year. Yay. And
winning, just so that listeners know, if they're not familiar with NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month has been a thing in November. It's actually just been disbanded this year, like a couple of weeks ago. But basically the idea is to go for an entire month, and winning, as Melanie said, is basically writing your entire draft or 50,000 words in 1 month, which is a huge feat. Congratulations on getting that first draft done. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Yep. Okay. And that first draft, I cleaned it up a little bit, but I presented it to my critique group at the time, and it was a Ferencan draft. I was not aware of it because that was just not where my head was at the time. I got, for my poor draft, I'll say, got a new bolt-on in it.
Yeah.
And because it didn't really know what it wanted to be, I didn't know what it wanted to be. So I found a fully developed romance with all of the explicit stuff. I had a fully developed Mean Girls in University thing going for alternate Brenda. Brenda's my protagonist, by the way. And then for Brenda herself, she was doing all kinds of military-esque infiltration, exfiltration stuff herself, which she had no background in. So none of it made sense. None of it made sense.
I actually love this story, Melanie. I've never asked you a question before because that book that you described with the explicit romantic piece and the Mean Girls and the military, none of that is the book that you ended up with or that we worked on. So where did you, okay, I don't know where this conversation is going, but I'm here for it. No. Okay. So how did that lead you to, you've written tons before, you have other published works. And so what was it about this project that led you to be like, oh my goodness, I want to work with a coach? Because we did end up working together on this project.
Yeah. So before I reached out to you, I did do something that I had never done before. And I completely rewrote the book because I was trying to figure out revision on my own. And even though the book that I rewrote was basically the draft that you got, it was late 2020 when I handed that draft off, not late 2019. So late 2020 when I handed that draft off to my critique group, and they said I wasn't getting the emotion on the page. At the same time, I started a new position at work in which I was in learning mode for the first time in 12 years. And between the two things, I had a double hit of imposter syndrome, and I sort of bottomed out in early 2021. I ended up reaching out to my employee assistance program. And through that counseling, I actually started exploring the idea that maybe I could be neurodivergent. Because one of the things that sort of resonated with me from that critique saying I didn't get the emotion on the page is that I live in my head. Okay. And the lessons of my life have taught me that expressing my authentic emotion only ever gets me into trouble. It doesn't earn me friends. It doesn't make anybody feel good. It just caused all sorts of sort of relationship difficulties throughout my life. And so I was exploring, thought maybe I could be neurodivergent. It had been with me for a few years. I'd heard an interview on CBC with somebody who was neurodivergent and late diagnosed. And again, I resonated with that a lot, but it just sat in the back of my mind until this point. And then once I was in counseling and exploring the idea, this was a very fortunate thing because most people don't have this experience with diagnosis, but I got a referral to a local psychotherapist who specialized in autism diagnosis. And so May of 2021, I was diagnosed as autistic.
And how did that change your whole view on what you were working on? Because I know it did, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, and I always say this about my diagnosis to anybody who will ask because I'm very open about it.
Thank you for that. I think people need to hear it. You said you came to it through an interview that you heard, and thank you for giving back.
Yeah. It was a relief because suddenly I had this explanation for everything that I had ever struggled with in my life. And it was a revelation because it gave me a new context, a new way of understanding myself. It was a process. I was researching in research mode on my own neurotype for quite a while. So it was a revelation because it gave me new context to understand my experiences. And I was deep in research mode to understand myself and my neurotype. So in that same year, I had sent it my poetry collection. I got things together and I sent it my poetry collection. And I started to consider my fiction writing in that I wanted to find a way to get that emotion on the page. I wanted to find a way to express what I needed to about the characters. And I made the decision. It was actually part of the revelation is that you write what you know. So I looked at all the characters that I have written, and they are all to some degree neurodivergent because I'm writing from my own experience.
Amazing. And you didn't know that, right?
And I
And so
had no idea.
people are saying, oh, this is not what we expect from characters. And you didn't have a way to be like, but this is my experience, right?
Yes.
And so that's what that critique brought home. I love how it's true. We do write from our own experience. You don't have to only write from your experience, but everything is colored with how you see the world. And so that makes a lot of sense. And I love that you were able to work through that and your writing was mirroring that journey that you're also going on.
Yeah. I reached out to you first in late 2022. We had been working together.
I looked it up, October 2022. That's right. And there's lots of reasons for that. And we're going to get into it as well. But yes, by then you knew that this novel that you had started as a NaNoWriMo draft with Brenda going to a different world, Brenda was neurodivergent, and you were going to document that experience of her going to another world and finding that her person there or her equivalent in that other space was not, right? That was the germ of what you were going to accomplish. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like I was for most of my life, not diagnosed, not even aware that she was. And so by being presented with an alternate version of herself, who was none of the things that she was, but it really forced her to do that self-examination and self-discovery and realize that, yes, she is. And I won't say it's a superpower because it is one of the sort of misconceptions, but basically she's a perfectly valid person in and of herself. And the way she thinks is just different, not less than, it's just different.
Yes. And so this was an amazing project. I was really blessed to be a part of it because there were some things technically that we had to figure out, right? Mm-hmm. Because you had this construct where Brenda lived in her head a lot. And so what did that look like? And what physically, and you guys can't see Melanie. I wish you could see her smiling because she's, oh yeah, that was really hard. We had to play with something. There's not a lot of rules. People come to an editor or a book coach and expect us to be like, oh, if you have a neurodivergent character who's also trapped in the mind of a non-neurodivergent character, we could punctuate it like this. Like we had to play with it and see how it felt and see what it looked like. And it took a minute to figure out this amazing construct. It's a science fiction book, by the way, but it's based on a lot of reality. And it was really a neat challenge. And once you got that construct, then you just ran with it, right? Yeah. Once you figured out how to document that on the page, then it was like, it all fell into place.
Yeah. And one of the other things, because we're on the Show Don't Tell podcast.
Yes, please.
Is that in my previous craft learnings, I think I had taken Show Don't Tell quite literally in that I could never tell anything. And so I tried to show everything. And the way that I knew how to do that was by visceral reactions.
Yes.
And I didn't know how to do interiority. Right. So, and I was missing the fact that interiority and the physical reactions and dialogue and whatever's happening in the setting, it all ties together. And then it's not really never tell. It is
not at all.
Know when to tell and how to tell. And what we started to work on.
Yeah, because I think it's true. It's the reason I have this podcast. It's the reason I can talk about Show Don't Tell all day is because it is really misunderstood. And I think especially for beginner writers, and you're not a beginner writer, but when you were a beginner writer, I'm sure this was hammered home into your brain, Show Don't Tell. And that's because our natural instinct is to tell or to just summarize things. And it is a little bit more difficult to get into those other things. when a writer gets to the point where I'm like, okay, you can actually tell this, you're showing too much. And that we did get to that point, right? Where we're like, okay, there's a balance and that's amazing. And then the writers are like, what? But it's because you often hear it's out of balance. That what you were just talking about, that interiority or that reaction and the inner thoughts and the dialogue and all the 5 elements need to be balanced on the page for it to feel approachable and accessible to the reader and for it to feel 3-dimensional. And if you're leaning on any one of those too long, or if you describe a really boring situation for too long, I always love it when writers come to me with a scene where they want to show that their character is really bored. And so they write this 3 pages, and let me tell you, they succeed. They let me feel that boredom, but that's not where you want to necessarily be. So you got to pick and choose where you skip ahead or summarize and where you show it. And you were able to find that balance. It was more difficult because of the construct, because you had characters that were living inside the same brain, and you had it for a couple of different characters that were trying to battle that out as they shifted through different realities and different worlds. And it was a really cool challenge. I think it turned out amazing, but it wasn't your typical, it wasn't standard. So I loved it.
Thanks.
I loved it. Okay. So thank you so much for trusting me with this deep work and this book. It was amazing. So October 2022 was when we started working together, and this book has taken you on a journey, and it's been a little over 2 years. But there were lots of reasons for that, right? Life happens, and we can get into that or not, but it's okay. Like, a book takes as long as it takes. And you even launched another book in there. Can you tell us about the book that you launched while you were also writing this other book?
Yeah, I did mention it before because in 2021, when I was sorting out my diagnosis and everything, I also was like, I really wanted to get something out in the world. And I had been publishing poetry in little anthologies and things like that since the mid 90s. And so I wanted to get that out in the world as well. I reached out to a friend of mine, Kim Bonner. She's a former poet laureate of Sudbury. And she was the vice president of the Writers Union of Canada. Now she's moving into the president's role. So she's in there. She knows.
Amazing. That's going to be so amazing.
Yeah. And so she looked at what I had collected and made some suggestions, editing and placement and that kind of thing. And I submitted it to a couple of different places, which has, again, unfortunately folded. Or are they back? I can't even remember.
It's been such a tough year for publishers in general, but Canadian publishers, tough couple of years, I should say. Yeah.
And then to a local publisher, Latitude 46. And I heard in actually the spring of 2022 that they were interested. So it was a long sort of progress, but this is one of the lessons of publishing is that it is a long process.
It takes a long time. And despite the fact that we started working on this book in 2022, you kept coming back to it, right? And I love it. I was never in any doubt that you were going to finish it because you were really clear and updating me on what was happening and why it was happening. And okay, I got to go launch this other book and then I'm coming back to it.
So yeah, when Latitude accepted, they signed me in 2022 for a launch in 2024. And so in between, I got a lovely photo shoot. I got all sorts of, I worked with an editor to the lovely Tannis McDonald, who's a professor at Wilfrid Laurier University.
Amazing.
She was awesome. We worked together on that and choosing the cover, which was actually done by my cousin, who's a local textile artist. And she does very group of 70 work, I'll say, because she does go out hiking, canoeing, camping, and she gets a lot of inspiration from the landscape. So it was very Northern Ontario, very neat. And so we got all that together. Launch was last April 6th. So we're just past the anniversary date, the launch of The Art of Floating. And for the last year, I've been doing all sorts of things like going to Wordstock here in Sudbury. I went to a Conspiracy 3 reading in Marks Bay. had the signing, did a local book fair in the summer. I'm trying to get out, but it's really hard with a debut, particularly debut poetry, to get a lot of traction, because even if your publisher, and my publisher did, send out my name to all of the literary festivals, and even if you have a PR company, as my publisher did, who, was promoting the work,
Yeah, it's tough.
you can't get invited unless the venue thinks that you're worthwhile. And with debut, it's very difficult to get that traction. So that was another lesson. Moving back to Reality Bomb then. Yeah, so it's been a really weird journey, because after we had our first, and I think it was just like your introductory package that
Yeah, where we mapped it out and we made some decisions about, or you made the decisions, and they looked at the whole project and figured out what the plan was.
yeah, and my first draft of the inside outline and all that wonderful stuff. And then there was issues with my employment. I didn't have the salary that I had before, and I didn't have the disposable income that I had before, so I had to pause. And that spring of 2023, my husband broke his shoulder, and I was in caregiver mode for the period of his recovery, and working full time and taking care of him and doing all the grocery shopping and all the housework and all that kind of stuff. I did not have the spoons left over to do anything else, unfortunately.
Absolutely. You also found it takes a lot of time and also energy and resources to get this sort of collaborative coaching as well. Found such creative ways to keep going on that, even when, you were at the end of what your resources were, and then you found grants and you found other subsidies and ways to actually keep going and get more coaching and get more programs. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I just love that you weren't ready to let it go. And there are actually many creative ways that you can get your creative supports funded.
I did find the time to submit some grant applications, including to the Canadian Science Fiction and Fantasy Association for their first professional development grant. And I was successful. Once I got the news about that and I got that grant, I got in touch with you and said, hey,
Let's do it.
Let's continue on.
Yeah.
And so that was good. And we were moving through that. And then last year, we had another significant pause, because both my husband and I have mothers who are in their 80s. And unfortunately, fortunately for them, unfortunately for us, but we're moving into caregiver zone.
Yeah.
And there were some health issues and some hospitalizations, and so some things that we had to deal with. And so starting about last July, I took a brief hiatus there, got back to it as soon as the issue was resolved. But then shortly on the tails of that, there was another one, and then another one, and then another one. And
and you did keep me in the loop, and I was just sending you like every bit of strength, because it was a hard year. It was a hard year, but you're an amazing daughter and daughter-in-law and did what you had to do, right?
Yeah. So we took care of what we needed to take care of. And then Christmas came and things seemed to be resolved to the point where I was confident in finishing this thing. And so we still had a couple of sessions left.
Yeah.
And we finished the thing. It was, yeah, I was just so happy. It was like Snoopy happy dancing. And
it was amazing to have that project come back into my life at that time as well. It was like a missing child or a missing friend that had come back, and we got to see it through to the end. And I just love, Melanie, throughout all of that, I just want to say that I love that you couldn't always put yourself first. And that's sometimes life, right? You only have so many spoons, but you still had your creativity and yourself in mind, and you were making those choices. I'm just wondering, like, I think sometimes we think that we should be able to do everything through in a straight line, and that's the most efficient path. But I think that even having that time and space and the time away from it, you came at it with different renewed energy. And sometimes putting a project away for a few months is the best thing for it. Do you think that this book would be different if you'd have been able to drop everything, your job and everything, and just focus on it and get it done in 6 months?
It
Could the
would
project be
definitely
different?
have been different, but it would not have been the book that it is.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I'm much happier with what we did together
Yeah.
and everything that I learned. And actually, I can't remember whether it was, I think it was spring of or late winter 2023, when you
Okay.
did the month-long revision mentorship.
Developmental editing mentorship.
Yeah, I did that
In 2024.
2024, really?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like
February 20. Yeah. February 2024. Yeah. I did another one in September, but you were in the February group.
Yeah. But that was because even while we've been working together for a while and I was learning, that's brought a lot of your lessons and methodology home. So it actually allowed me to be a little more interpretive with your comments. It was like, he's asking this for a reason. What reason is it? And then I dig into the draft and figure out, okay, so what is it that I'm missing?
Yeah. And we talk about this too. Sometimes as a coach and an editor, I have to be a bit brave and be like, "Here's that." Because and I usually look 2 or 3 times before I throw up my hands and say, it's not on the page. But yeah, sometimes it's helpful because it's obvious to, and every writer does this. We think it's there, but yours was such a complex subject. And sometimes it wasn't even obvious which character was there because they're living in the same brain. And yeah, so sometimes I had to ask. And I love that we were able to get to that point where you're like, okay, if Suzy doesn't understand it, something's missing. What's missing? How do I fix it? And we worked
Yeah.
through a few of those together. So that was a lot of fun. Awesome.
Also getting a lot more comfortable with saying, okay, so is this something that I really want to spend time and energy fixing? Or do I just
Yeah.
cut it? But
Yeah. Do I just cut it? Exactly. Do I just be ruthless? That's a hard lesson, right? And the other thing is, especially when I'm working with writers, I will comment on a lot of things, but at the end of the day, it's your book. And again, there's only so many things that you can fix. And if you get 10 comments and you fix 3 of them, the writing's still better. So it's not like one of those things where it has to be absolutely everything. I will give you every bit of critique, and most of my writers don't want me to hold back or send that and just say, oh, give me the top things. No, give it all, right? It's most of the people who want to work with me. But again, you can't fix everything. It's not about achieving perfection. At the end of the day, it's about, we spent a lot of time on this throughout the project. What is it that you want to convey, which was really clear right from the get-go, at least once I was involved. And is it working, right? Is the reader going to get it? And so I think one of the biggest things that you expressed was, I want to share just what you talked about at the beginning of this interview, what it feels and what my experience is and how my brain works, right? And how that all works. And my character is going to be bit of that. Obviously, it's not you, but it's somebody else that's having a similar experience. And so that was really fun to bring to life. And at the end of the day, to be able to reflect back and be like, hey, this is what I'm getting out of this. Is this what you wanted? Right. And that's the end of the day. That's what matters. Yeah. So was there anything that you learned during this coaching project, during writing this novel, from everything that was new or different from the writing that you'd done before? We talked a little bit about the not be so literal about show, don't tell. Was there anything else?
it was really learning that balance of not just focusing on literally, which is an autistic thing, literally show and never tell, to learning how to balance the elements of the story. So you have interiority. And I'm like a writing craft junkie. And I
love that about you, by the way. We love it. It's so fun.
I'm because it is one of my special interests. And I have been signing up for some of CC Lira's webinars. And the most recent one was starting it. And I've also done her interiority course. because I wanted to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And so that sort of taught me a lot about what interiority even is, right? And that even though it is telling, it is coming from the character. So it's through that filter. And you can do so much when you actually express things through that character's mindset to give context without actually just plain out telling, you know?
Absolutely.
And you don't have to do the info dumps. You don't have to do the plot explaining, or you don't have to spend a lot of words to actually make a big difference. And so that was one of the things that it was that balance. It was the interiority plus a little bit of like the physicality and the setting and the visceral reactions and the dialogue to try and get, so what is the most effective mode for conveying X?
Yeah. And I love that you learn so much and that you're always consuming, because there are 1,000 different ways to convey writing rules. And at the end of the day, just like there are 1,000 different ways that our brains work and interpreting those, and some things land and some things don't, you'll find that most people who talk about writing are probably trying to teach the same thing. At the end of the day, we want to light up readers' brains. And there are some scientific ways that happens. And something that I say might resonate, something that someone else says might resonate. And I love that we could always have those back and forth discussions. And you would bring up some other methodology and be like, oh, yeah, that's the same thing, right? This is all the same thing. And we're just all trying to find different ways to get writers to figure that out. It's a puzzle. It's so challenging. Writing is such a challenging pastime, really, or job. Okay, amazing. Melanie, what is next for your poetry book and for Reality Bomb? What are we watching for next from you? What does this next iteration or year look like? New things.
Yeah, we're just gonna just branches of the Greater Sudbury Public Library and done readings. So we just did one last Saturday on the 12th. And we had several members of the Sudbury Writers Guild come out, which people who know both of us, and also a couple of my former high school teachers came out. And that was just lovely to see them again.
That's terrific. I love that.
Yeah. And so we're going to do another reading at the Coppercliff branch in time for Mother's Day. So I'm doing stuff. I'm doing what I can within the bounds that
Absolutely. And Melanie, I'm never one to be saying do more. That is that's not the message. In fact, pick one thing is always the message, right? One thing that you enjoy doing and show up and do it regularly. So if that's in-person events, then that's in-person events that you enjoy. They're a little bit more difficult, but if that's something that is your strategy, then keep going. They will come back. I think we're due for the next iteration of what these festivals and funding looks like. I think through the pandemic, some things limped through and lost some funding and lost some steam, and I'm seeing newer things coming. So I think it's just going to be that turnover and that new resurgence, because people still want to talk about this. People still want to get together. People still love literature and books. Okay, so Reality Bomb, you're done the draft, or done the polished draft, and now trying to find a home.
Yes. So that's what I was working on next. I've got a synopsis and a query sketched out, but I really need to go back at least one more time and just go through, and because I have to cut. And I'm going to use those tools. So I constructed the synopsis using the inside outline.
Perfect.
And you may find this interesting, is that when I was assembling all these bits and pieces from the inside outline, because it changed so much over the course of our work together, this doesn't make sense. And so I was like, okay, so this is why Suzy had half of her questions, because I left it out of the inside outline. So I had to rewrite things just to get the synopsis together. And it's really going to be a good guide, because this is going to be a boring part. I can tell just from trying to do the synopsis. So I'm going
You could see it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can see it. And that's why I love the inside outline that Melanie's talking about is the primary tool that I use for outlining with writers. And it's by Jenny Nash of Author Accelerator. And basically, it's a 3-page summary of your entire book, and it's got its own particulars about it. But I love it because it ends up being a living document. And because I can see, just like Melanie's saying when she went back to it, she's, oh, wait a minute. You can see in those 3 pages, you can immediately see where there's going to be a slow part, where there's going to be a problem, where it's missing causation between the scenes, where one scene isn't driving to another. So it's actually a brilliant tool. I'm so happy that you're still using that and that we worked on in October of 2022. It does. It changes. It doesn't mean outlining a book doesn't mean that you have to keep it exactly the same. And as we talked about, there was a lot of things that Melanie worked on through this and wanting to incorporate her own experience, but it's also this science fictional world that isn't anything like her life. So there's these 2 really cool things that she's trying to incorporate. And yeah, the events in it changed as we went, but it's easier to update a 3-page document. And yours was longer by the end, but it was easier to update that sort of succinct document than to take a story grid, for example, which is a really complex method, and to try to use it again. It's just too overwhelming. Okay, awesome. Where can readers find your presence on the interweb, your current publications, and follow you on your journey, Melanie? Where should we send them?
Okay, my home base is my website, which is melaniemarttila.ca. And all you have to remember is that there are 2 T's and 1 L in my name, and you will find.
Awesome. We'll drop the link in the show notes so they won't be. I have the same problem where nobody can spell my name. Yes. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, and we'll have you on again soon when Reality Bomb finds a home.
Yes, I'd love to.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Don't Tell Writing with me, Suzy Vidori. Help me continue to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or planning to write. Please consider subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening. Also visit suzyvidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly inspired writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about upcoming training, events, and writing courses that happen in my community. If you're feeling brave, check the show notes and send us a page of your writing that isn't quite where you want it to be yet for our Show Don't Tell page review episodes. Remember, that book and your writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make it the absolute best. If you're feeling called to write that book, keep going, and I'm going to be right here cheering you on. See you again next week.